We need to get started with our first speaker, and that is Michael Cockrill. Michael is the Washington State Chief Information Officer. He was appointed by Governor Inslee in January of 2013. His responsibilities include overseeing the state's strategic vision for information technology, evaluating state agencies' IT spending and major technology projects, and establishing IT policies and standards across the state government. He's got over 20 years of operational experience in software companies like PhotoRocket, Atlas Accelerator, Mixer, and QPass. He's, like a lot of people, a 9-year veteran of Microsoft. He holds a double BS degree in computer science and math, and he's got graduate work done at UCLA and University of Otago, New Zealand. So, Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Gotta find my slides here. Help me out here, Meg. While she's getting the slides, I gotta tell you a story. Most of the time when I was watching my picture flash by there, and they said I was the CIO of Washington State. On this side of the mountains, that's okay. But everybody else is like, go Cougars. So when my slides come up, it's going to say cybersecurity in the boardroom. So I need to both apologize and warn everybody that the presentation that I prepared today is less about what it says in the agenda, which was all about the regulation and what the state's doing, and I just thought that was kind of dull. I live it every day. So what I'm really going to do is talk more about things that I hope make a difference to the people in this room, which is as things change, as the market goes, as the cybersecurity market advances, what does that mean to businesses day to day? And in particular, I'm not going to be talking about anything that has to do with technology today. I'm going to be talking about what does it mean to your business and what does it mean to the economy that cybersecurity is doing what it's doing. So first of all, let's see if I can get my clicker to work. How many people have been to a cybersecurity presentation before? Not just a presentation, but one of these, a conference. Raise your hands. Okay, so my presentation is going to be just like everybody else's. We're going to start with a bunch of platitudes about security, and then we're going to move on to a bunch of frightening statistics that aren't necessarily true, and then I'm going to end with a whole range of meaningless word clouds. Or I'm going to do something else. Or I'm going to try to focus on the things that I think are some emerging trends and things that are driving issues that business leaders really need to think about. So we're going to talk about what does cybersecurity mean to financial instruments that drive your business every day. What's going on there's an entire industry of lawsuits that are going to change the way you have to do business every day. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening in government, because that is what I said I would talk about. And I want to talk about education and how important that is. And I want to do it from a particular perspective because I never wanted to be a CIO. I always wanted to be a futurist. I have no idea how you get a job as a futurist, but if anybody has an opening, pick me. So I want to look at it from somewhere between 5 and 10 years down the road and give you some predictions about how cybersecurity and how the market is going to change, and things to anticipate as you think about managing your businesses moving forward. So to do that, I want to start off with this is the platitudes part. The internet has fundamentally, structurally changed the way we do business. From the government perspective, that's really critical. As an advisor to the governor, one of the things I tell him all the time is cybersecurity is, well, it is an issue about bits and bytes. More importantly, it's an issue about economic development, about job security. One of government's roles is to answer the question, or is to enable commerce. And the way the cyber threat has emerged, it's really endangering the way commerce is done, and that's happening all over the world. This is a statistic from 2010, where worldwide, 4.1% of the GDP you could associate with the internet. In less than 4 years, that number is almost at 9% of the GDP. And in the United States, one of the things that means, if you look ahead n number of years, I'm going to say 7 to 10 years, one of the things you're going to find out, and here's where I make that bold futurist predictions, there's only going to be half a dozen major data center companies left in 10 years. There is only, and what you'll find in addition to that is that the market is going to bifurcate. It's going to get condensed at the top end, the Fortune 500, and big money is going to get consolidated into a limited set of operational facilities, a limited set of software. And then on the other end, it's going to scooch down towards consumers. And you're going to find, just as you are in consumer electronics and consumer software, there'll be a ton of innovation in cybersecurity that is aimed at individuals' desktops. Well, one of the things that that's going to do is it's going to leave a big hole in the middle. It's going to leave a big hole in the small to medium-sized businesses, and the biggest issue there is going to be about people. Those 6 companies, they're going to suck up all of the talent, and it's going to be nearly impossible unless things like the program here continue. It's going to be nearly impossible for small to medium-sized businesses to be able to find the people that have this very specialized expertise. The other thing you're going to see is a massive focus from a national security perspective on critical infrastructure. This is and this will accelerate that brain drain that will bifurcate the markets. So these are all sort of structural things that are going to happen. And you know, one of the things that, because I'm a government guy, one of the things that I tell the governor, and I tell anybody who will give me a microphone, frankly, that one way to think about cybersecurity is the value of the internet. We're all taking advantage of the value of the internet, the way that it makes the world much smaller, it increases globalization, it infiltrates every part of our economy and our infrastructure. Cybersecurity is the tax on the value of the internet. And we're not paying our taxes right now. We're not, and you have to ask yourself, what kind of economy are you going to build if you're not paying your taxes, and we're also not paying our insurance. So I want to talk about cyber insurance for a little bit, because this is something that I believe is going to make a fundamental change. 5 years from now, well, first of all, do people have a good feel for where the cyber insurance industry is right now? Yes? No? Some people do. I'll give you really briefly. You can buy cyber insurance. It's very expensive, and there's 2 kinds. There's one kind where the insurance company goes and they look at a profile of your risk. What kind of records do you have? They take the number of credit cards you have in your infrastructure, they multiply it by 200, and they say that's the size of the policy you need. And then they add some on top of that. And then there's another one where they look at your infrastructure in detail, and they say, if you're willing to give us these reps and warranties, then we will give you this kind of insurance. And then they add something on top of that. And the reason that they have to add something on top of those is because insurance companies don't know how to underwrite risk, cyber risk. They don't have the expertise, nobody does. They don't have the actuarial tables, nobody does. So the structural mechanisms for insurance don't work. So, and insurance is a really, really crucial part of the economy. When you're trying to deliver services, you got to pay your taxes, you got to have insurance. And right now, this structural part of our economy ends up being too expensive. And it's too expensive because the insurance companies can't underwrite it. They can't really know what I think of as the market clearing price. And so they have to add a risk premium. They add a risk premium, it's too expensive, and people don't buy it. So I'm going to make my other futurist projection. 5 years, 7 years, 10 years from now, this will change, because it has to change. But you're not going to buy cyber insurance from AIG or Allstate. You're going to buy it from your vendors. Cisco and EMC and Symantec are going to come and offer, not really an insurance policy, but they'll create a product that says, if you buy my services, in addition, you have to follow my advice, you have to have your infrastructure live inside my monitoring system. But if you do that and do what I tell you to, then I will, on your behalf, go to London and make a deal with Lloyd's to be able to create, in addition to these daily services, also a cyber insurance policy. And that's going to be really important. Your cyber insurance is going to be really important for the way you operate your business going forward. And I'll explain about that in a second. So insurance is going to fundamentally change. I would love to invite me back someday, and we'll think through what cyber risk will do to a whole range of other financial instruments that underscore, that are the underpinnings of not just the way the economy does business, but in particular the way small to medium businesses operate. Think about when that ever-increasing wave of risk gets to the loan officer that's trying to underwrite your small business loan, and how you're going to have to be able to, to get a $100,000 loan, you're going to have to be able to document your cyber insurance, or excuse me, your cybersecurity policies. Think about the conversation when you're trying to do a private placement with a venture capitalist, regardless of what kind of business you are, because this risk is going to be so pervasive that it'll be one of the top 3 or 4 questions people ask. And here's part of the reason why. There is, right now, and 5 to 7 years from now, we'll see this play out. The Target lawsuit has created this really interesting scenario around class action lawsuits. There are about 70 class action lawsuits that have been filed against Target, some from banks, some from consumers. Most of them are working under a legal theory of negligence. The court has never won a suit, or has never granted an award based on negligence. There have been a lot of awards based for cybersecurity, but the legal theories that they've been won on have been really complex and not obvious. But if you look at the fact patterns around the Target lawsuit, there's a very high likelihood that one of those 70 suits meet that definition. And here's why that makes a huge difference. Negligence pierces the corporate veil. Negligence means officers and directors are personally liable. So when officers and directors become personally liable for cyber risk, what does that mean to the way not just public companies run, but that every company runs? How will that change the relationship between the board of directors and the CISO? Well, one thing I can tell you for sure is that your CFOs are going to get really smart about cybersecurity, and your CFOs are going to have a very different relationship with your CISOs, because the risk guys on your board are going to be saying, that's my house and that's my car, and that when the court says you are negligent, the world will become a different place from a corporate perspective, and that goes right back to insurance. At that point, the whole concept of cyber insurance, when the individuals who are making those decisions in the boardroom have personal liability, they only have one, not really, but as a general rule, the way that you mitigate risk is you insure against it. Well, cyber insurance doesn't work right now, and it goes back to what I was saying before. It has to work. Our economy doesn't work without insurance. So Target, or fill in the long list of suits that we all know about. One of the interesting things about it is part of the reason that Target got breached is that they had a limited amount of capacity to protect their infrastructure. And they had, like we all do, thousands of people attacking them with a limited amount of dollars to defend. That exact same dynamic is going to happen in the courtroom. They have 70 different well-funded groups that are attacking them. They have a limited amount to defend. One of those groups is likely to get through, and when they do, the dam's going to break, and the world is going to be thinking about cyber in a really different perspective. Here's the other thing that's going to do that. From a market disclosure perspective, and this is going to be something that trickles down from public companies all the way through the rest of the economy. Part of everybody's, whatever they are, S10s and their filings with the SEC has to detail risk. And if you don't detail risk, and that risk comes about, then you leave yourself open for a lawsuit if the price of your stock goes down. And this is happening in the market right now. Big companies get breached, their stock goes down, the plaintiff bar goes back, looks at their S10s and goes, they didn't tell everybody that if somebody steals 400 million credit cards that their stock price is going to go down. They didn't exercise care in disclosing that risk. So shareholder lawsuits are starting to, the plaintiff bar is creating class actions from shareholder lawsuits when stock prices go down. That's going to, again, change the way that the board in the Fortune 500 thinks about cyber risk. And when that happens, that part of the economy ends up trickling down across the entire economy, both into small businesses, but also into the way vendors sell you stuff, what is available in the market, etc. So when you look forward, the cyber market, what you can buy, how you can buy it, how you deploy it, is going to have, is going to be influenced in a big way by class action lawsuits, as painful as that is. So the other thing that I want to talk a little bit about, because like I said, I did say I would, is regulation and how that might affect you. When you look forward not very long, well actually when you look backward, you can see there have been, I think, 3 states that created laws that required that some required that when the state has a breach, that they immediately disclose it as soon as they find out. Some required that companies within the state follow that same guidelines. Gratefully, all of those laws have been vetoed by the governor when they got there, because that would create the idea that every time you thought you had a breach, you had to disclose without complete information. If you start to think about that, if you know enough about what's going on in this country today, and you believe some of the stats that you heard before, which was the tip of the iceberg, as we all know, it would create massive economic instability, because it would lower consumers' confidence that they could use their credit card, that they could give personal information. Either that, or it would just become so much noise that consumers didn't care. And both of those could be a nightmare. So this is one of those pieces of legislation that is going through different state houses that we pay really close attention to, because I'm convinced it would create a really unstable economic environment. And it comes from a good place. People, are interested in making sure that the government protects consumers from people misusing their information. But this kind of regulation is a big, blunt hammer that would be really, really negatively affecting things. One thing that is the opposite of that, and I hate to put Sarbanes-Oxley on a slide in front of a bunch of business people, because usually you get tomatoes thrown at you when you do that. But that idea that anybody who deals with securities, anybody whose company is large enough to sell stock, has a requirement to the public that the leaders of the company have looked at their risk profile, and that the CEO actually attests to a set of controls. Today that doesn't apply to cyber, but it will. And this is another one of those sets of regulations that, while we haven't seen it come through state houses yet, there's been people have been talking about it at the federal level for a while. I don't think a state could actually make that work, because commerce is just too international and cross too many borders. But they're looking at regulations like this at the federal level, and in fact, it's being pushed by the technology industry. I had an opportunity recently to talk with a CISO for Cisco, and when I asked him, if you got to change one law, what would it be? That's what he said. That'll make more of a difference than anything else. Make the individuals attest that they actually understand the security controls in cyber and that they're implemented. The other thing that you're going to see from a regulatory perspective is much more focus on critical infrastructure in cyber. Today, our critical infrastructure has a patchwork of regulation, and in the state of Washington, it means that there are some dams that are completely unregulated. So they don't have any requirement to anybody else to have oversight or to have anyone else look at their controls. Dams get paid, dams have the same issue that everybody else does. Electric companies get paid on rates, and those rates don't go up very much, and they're all strapped for cash. And if you don't have that, something like the executives putting their personal reputation on the line, that's one of the things that gets cut in the budget. That's a national security issue. So I'll tell one story and then just generally try and say, if there's one thing that you can do about it, if there's one thing that you could support, if there's one thing you could write a check for, early education, K through 12 education in cyber. When you're a futurist, that's our only hope. And the reason that I have China and North Korea up there is because they're doing that, right? North Korea has become a world player more because they have been investing in cyber warfare than because they've been investing in nuclear weapons. Much more, and they're much more dangerous as a result of it. This is true across the entire world, and it'll affect all of us. People in this business, when the U.S., I wouldn't say declare war, when the U.S. started engaging in Ukraine, the people who pay close attention to cyber, all of them said JP Morgan's about to get hacked. Because there's a direct line between getting the Russians annoyed at you and having both the Russian military and the cyber community in Russia attack our financial institutions. And that's exactly what happened. So now I'm going to make one more prediction that really underscores why K through 12 education in cyber is so important. Around the Olympics next year, we are going to have at least attacks in Brazil. I said next year, in 2016. We'll hear about the cyber attacks that happen in Brazil at the very least. And we may see the effects of them here. And I'll tell you why. See that picture? See how Brazil is blacked out? On November 10th, on November 8th, 2009, the Brazilian government announced that they won the Olympic bid. That was about, I might get my time frames wrong, but I think that was about 6 months after they announced that they got the World Cup. So Brazil is governed by the official government and 3 big groups of organized crime. Every one of those groups of organized crime spend their time and money going into the barrios and educating children on financial threats in cyber and in attacking critical infrastructure. When they got the World Cup, those groups went to the government and said, we don't want the world stage looking at Brazil. Don't do that. Don't take the World Cup. And then there was attacks, and there were ministers that had bad days after that. But the organized crime was pretty clear. We don't want to see that. On November 8th, they announced, not only do we have the World Cup, we have the Olympics in 2016. That happened the day after. 2/3 of the electrical grid in Brazil went down on November 10th. And there's really no question what that was. I mean, it was a cyber attack. And it was done by the kids in the barrio from organized crime. This is happening all over the world. This is the next area of warfare. And today, America is the least focused. We have a huge focus all across the nation on STEM education. And with a few exceptions, in the K through 12 space, cyber is almost completely ignored in STEM. So this is my projection. 2016, we're going to see Brazil do this again because we know they're there. We know they're in our unregulated infrastructure. And it'll be interesting to see as that threat continues to go up, what happens to not just the economy, but the critical infrastructure. And we're in a dangerous world today, and what you can do about it is really all about invest in education, because we can't make really significant changes today, but we can in 5 to 7 years. So I don't know how much time I have left. I'm happy to take a couple questions if we're not too far behind schedule. Or not. Oh, I got one question back there. Oh, we got 5 minutes, or we can, I know that we're running a little bit late. All right, well, thank you, and on behalf of the governor, oh.
So, what does success look like to you?
What does success look like to me? Meg asked this question last night, and I'll tell you what I told her. I want Agnes Kirk, I want you people to be the only one who ever know Agnes's name. Agnes is your next speaker, and she's the CISO for the state of Washington. So as long as nobody else knows Agnes's name, that means that we didn't get breached, and I get to keep my job for a little bit longer. Thank you.
So that was going to be my little intro to Agnes.
Thank you for doing that for me, Michael. I would just continuously encourage you all to think throughout the day of what success looks like to you. And I had the opportunity to ask those two wonderful people that question last night. And Agnes leads a really strong and significant team that's helping to ensure that Washington State continues to be an awesome place to live and secure our cybersecurity environment. So I feel really, really grateful to have Agnes here today to talk with you all about what the cyber threats really look like for businesses in Washington State and to give us a good summary of where that risk assessment is at. And I thank her for being here publicly because she does want to stay anonymous. So